Today I'm going to show you one of the methods that we have to solve quadratic equations. Remember, so far we've talked about solve by graphing, we've solved by factoring. Now we're going to look at solving by square roots. So yesterday you learned how to reduce radicals. We're going to use that to help us with solving the equations by the square root method. Alright, so the first thing that we want to try to do is to remember to get the squared term on the left side by itself. So we want to make sure that it says x squared equals. Number 2 over here does not say x squared equals, so we're going to have to move the 9 on that one. Once we have the x squared by itself, then we're going to square root each side. So again, you're going to want to remember your perfect squares. If those numbers are in your problem, then it's a quicker completion of the question. I'm going to give you some of those numbers again. Remember, these are the values that you want to have written down someplace in your notes, or you want to have your half sheet with your squares on it. You want to have those handy. Alright, so the first question we've got over here is x squared equals 16. The x squared term is on the left side by itself, so we can go ahead and just square root both sides. So you're going to put the radical on the top, and whatever you do on the left, you have to remember to do on the right. Once you do the square root of x squared always cancels itself out and leaves you with just x to the first. Remember, if you're splitting apart x squared like when we factor it, quick up here again, if we had x squared minus 9 and we were told to factor that, remember I always asked you what does x squared break into? X. So this is the same thing. The square root of x squared is just x equals. Now 16 is on your list. 16 comes from 4. But here's the part that you want to remember. You always have to have two answers with your solution, both the positive and the negative. So your answer is going to be plus and minus 4. Now you might say, how come? Well, if you take 4 times 4, doesn't that give you 16? Yes. What about negative 4 times negative 4? Doesn't negative times negative turn positive? Yes. So we have to have two answers with our solution. Those two answers are both the plus and the minus, and you can do that by putting that plus minus sign right on top of each other, like what I have circled right here. All right, question number 2, x squared minus 9 equals 0. So here you do not have the x squared by itself. So before you can square root both sides, you need to do plus 9. You need to get that 9 moved to the other side. That's going to give you x squared equals 9. And now you're ready to do square root on both sides. So we'll square root on the left, square root on the right. Square root of a square, remember, is just x equals. Now right here, every time you have to put plus and minus. And 9 is on your list. 9 is a perfect square. 9 comes from 3. So the two answers to this one are positive 3 and negative 3. X squared plus 5 equals 30. So the first thing we have to remember, again, we need that x squared to be by itself. We need to get this 5 moved to the other side. X squared equals, 5's cancel, 30 minus 5 is 25. Now we can go ahead and square root both sides. Cancel, x equals, right now, every time, plus and minus. And 25 is on your list. 25 comes from 5. So your two answers are plus and minus 5. Right, the next one, number 4. X squared is already by itself, so we can go ahead and do our square root on both sides. Cancel, x equals plus minus. Now, you notice underneath that square root sign it says negative 4. So the other day we talked about reducing radicals, and what do you do if you've got a negative sign? We know that 4 comes from 2, but you've got a negative sign in there, so it's negative 1 times 4. And remember, what's the square root of negative 1? Yes, I term. Square root of negative 1 equals I. So this one is plus or minus, I'll move it down here, plus or minus I, and then the square root of 4 is 2. Okay, now that's technically written backwards. We usually like to see the number first. So how about if we flip this around? 2i plus or minus 2i. All right, we're going to do one more, and then you can start working on the first half. 4x squared, so this is not by itself. We need to get this plane 25 moved to the other side. 4x squared equals 25. Now we don't want to square root yet because you've got that number 4 sitting there. You don't want anything sitting with the x squared. Hiding inside of there is a times sign, so we're going to get rid of the times by divide. The 4's will cancel. X squared equals, now I do not want you to divide this. I want you to leave it as 25 over 4 because both of those numbers are on your list. I'm not even going to go any farther than that. Both of these two numbers are on your list, so they are both perfect squares. Square root both sides, cancel, cancel, x equals plus minus right away. Now, inside the square root sign is a fraction. That means your answer is going to be a fraction. What does 25 come from? 5. What does 4 come from? 2. Starts like a fraction, ends like a fraction. So your answer in this case, x equals plus or minus 5 over 2. So it's okay to get fractions for answers sometimes. All right, so I want you to start the first half. This is on page 659. Go ahead and hit pause, work on those, and when you're ready, come on back and finish the worksheet, or finish the notes. All right, we're just going to do a couple more here. I think 3 more. Show you how a couple others might be set up when you're trying to solve. All right, so on this first one, the x squared is not by itself, so the first thing we have to do, remember, is move this 49. Drop down your 16x squared equals 49. 16x squared, I can't have that 16 sitting there, so just like that last question you did, we have to get rid of the 16. 16 is hiding with a times sign next to your x squared, so let's divide. 16's will cancel, x squared equals. Now again here, don't do a divide. Leave this looking like a fraction because you should recognize both of those numbers are perfect squares. I'll put those numbers back up here one more time. And I'm going to stop right there. Both of those numbers are visible, 49 and 16. So we can go ahead and do our square root both sides, cancel, x equals plus and minus every time. Start with plus and minus. And what does 49 come from? Over what does 16 come from? Answer is plus or minus 7/4. Right, number 7. Right, parentheses, x minus 5 squared equals 16. Now in this one you've got a quantity squared. If you have parentheses squared, you want to start right away with the square root. So we can square root left side, square root right side. Now just like before, the square root and the square will cancel each other out, which means you're left with what's underneath. It's not just x. What's underneath was x minus 5. You're still left with that. Equals, plus minus every time. 16's on your list. What's the square root of 16 again? Okay, now remember we're trying to solve for x, so you just have to do one more thing. I don't want that minus 5 sitting there. How do you want to do a minus 5? Plus 5. Now if I do something on the left, I have to do that on the right. So we're going to do a plus 5 on the left, we're going to do a plus 5 on the right. I want you to put it in front of the plus or minus sign, so it's going to look like x, cancel, equals 5, drop down the plus minus 4. Now you actually have 2 answers hiding in here, so we're going to come up with those 2 numbers. Why you do it one at a time. So pretend you're covering up the minus sign. How much is 5 plus 4? Comma. Now hide the plus sign. What is 5 minus 4? 1. So x is actually equal to 9 or 1. There you go. 9 or 1. All right, I have one more like that to try, and then we'll be all finished. Parenthesis x plus 2 squared equals 9. So again, you've got the quantity squared all by itself. So we can go ahead and do our square root, both sides. The square root and the square cancel each other out. X plus 2 equals, what do you put right away after the equal sign every time? Plus minus, and what does 9 come from? Okay, now sitting next to that 2, or sitting next to the x, remember you've got that plus 2. You want to move that plus 2 to the other side. What's the opposite of plus 2? And remember, whatever I do on the left, we're going to do on the right. So we're going to put a minus 2 on this side as well. X, cancel, equals. Now remember, you're putting that minus 2 number first. Put the plus and minus in the back. Plus, minus 3. X equals. Now we're going to do those two things again. So cover up the minus sign. How much is negative 2 plus 3? 1, comma. Now hide the plus sign. What's negative 2? Subtract 3. Negative 5. Those are your two solutions. Okay, so here's the second half to your homework, still on page 659, 10 through 12, 24 through 28. Okay, now this is the first half of section 9.7. I'll give you a video tomorrow. You'll be working on a worksheet to go with that one. But we're going to be looking for this video called 9.7 first half, solved by square roots. All right, good luck.